Okay, so welcome to the South Middle Community Area Plan webinar. My name is Gretchen Flores, and I will be walking you through a brief presentation, and then we can just talk about the plan itself. I can just jump to that. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let me try that again. Okay, you should be able to see the full presentation. You should be able to see it now.
Yep, I do. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. So the reason for today's webinar is again to walk you through where we have been in this planning process, what the purpose of it is, and then sort of next steps, and then to answer specific questions that you might have on the actual plans themselves. So the reason that we undertook the community area planning process is that Charlotte has continuously grown for the last decade or so and is projected to keep growing. So in response to that projected growth, the city adopted the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan in 2021, which defines the 20-year vision of growth and development for the city of Charlotte. That plan essentially calls for future growth to benefit as many people as possible. So it was really in response to how to accommodate growth in an equitable way citywide. So while the comprehensive plan provides a broad vision for the city, there are other levels of guidance that are needed to make sure that the vision comes to life. And so in the comprehensive plan, there was a planning framework that was created. And this is what it looks like. So again, the comp plan was adopted in 2021. That provides policy language. As a companion effort to that, there was a policy map that was adopted in 2022, and what that is the land use piece to the comprehensive plan. So the comp plan itself provides the policy language. The policy map provides the land use guidance. So what the policy map has is not only land use, but it's also guidance on things like open space, building form, and some mobility guidance as well. Level two of the planning framework are strategic plans, and what those are documents that provide more detail than the comprehensive plan on a particular topic. So, for example, if you're familiar with the strategic mobility plan that the city adopted, I believe it was 2022, that basically gives guidance on how to realize goal 5 of the comp plan and create safe and equitable mobility choices citywide. Then we move into level 3, which is where we are today in the community area plans, and those provide more guidance that are appropriate for land use, building form, infrastructure, and how that should all play out within the geographies themselves. And then level 4 are specific plans, and those focus on smaller areas within a geography and provide guidance for implementation of specific projects. So think of your corridor plans or your transit station plans, and that's what specific plans really look at. So they look at sort of the neighborhood level improvements that may be needed. It's important to note that levels 2 through 4 of this planning framework um, are all building upon the vision of the comprehensive plan. So the overall city vision is really guided by the comp plan, and then all of these other levels of planning really build off of that. And one of the core tenets in the comprehensive plan is equity. So what the purpose of the community area plans is really to create complete communities. And what that means is that we aim to create places where people can live, work, and play within proximity to each other, as well as without harming the environment. So that really talks about the walkability of an area, the proximity of that area to jobs, as well as to your the amenities and the daily goods and services that you might need. Now, in terms of where we've been with this process, this has been a 2-year process, which really started in 2023 and is sort of we're wrapping up that process now with review and adoption. In phase one in 2023, what we really did was we started to identify some of the community's priorities for action, and that was done through a series of workshops going out in the community and asking, did we get the mapping piece right? Are the uses where they should be on the map? And if not, how should that change? We found through that effort that the map was largely accurate, and there was really only a 6% change in the mapping effort that needed to be addressed through the community area planning process. Um, then through phase two and phase three, we really started asking about specific projects and programs to be able to make sure that we're delivering on the community's priorities and vision for each geography. And then in phase four, which was the fall of 2024, we started to develop the actual plans themselves and then an implementation strategy on how to actually bring all of these projects and programs to fruition. And now in phase five in this year, we are at the review and adoption phase. So that's sharing with the public the draft plans as well as sharing with council and the appropriate committees, what the draft plans are, what we've heard in the community, and then eventually review and adoption through council at some point. We're hoping later on this year. Everything that has been an output of each of those phases can be found on our website, and I can share that a link to that later on after I'm done with the presentation. Um, so in terms of how the plans were developed, again, we have 14 plans throughout the city, and they were all developed at the same time. They were developed using a systematic approach, which means that they are all or were all developed in the same way and will have some of the same components and format within them to try to make sure that they are equal in that sense, and then equitable in the sense that they point to specific um, plan geography components, and I'll get into what some of those are. Um, so these plans, again, have a common set of considerations for all decision makers. So, council and committees will be able to look at these plans when they're making certain decisions, most commonly the rezoning and then the capital investment decisions that council or the committees would need to make, and be able to have a consistent evaluation system across all 14 areas. So over time, with these plans, we can have some considerations on how growth should be happening in the following ways. So they would help establish or uh, they will help respect established neighborhoods. They will help align growth with our infrastructure capacity, and then help create vibrant mixed-use areas to accommodate the growth that's coming. We know that with all of the growth that's coming, we needed a comprehensive approach, and the way to do that in terms of accommodating that growth is to really drive it to the centers where the density and the infrastructure would be adequate to handle that. Now, moving into the actual components of the plan. So each plan has all of these components with some unique details in some of these chapters. So the first chapter is the introduction, and that's just a general kind of a purpose statement for the plans and what they're intended to do. The next two chapters are the community area profile and the community needs and goals. Those are really specific to the plans themselves. So community area profile looks at the demographics. So what are the demographics that exist within that area? And then the community needs and goals really looks at what are the needs of that geography. So needs in terms of housing, in terms of jobs, goods and services, and then what environmental impacts are seen in that geography. The next two sections are really the meat of the plans. It's really creating complete communities and then supporting the vision is where you find your policy language. And then supporting the vision has some assessments that really point to what projects and programs are either existing or where the gaps are. And that really helps inform then the decision making that could be beneficial to use at the council and committee level when you're looking at projects and programs to invest in. Supporting the vision also has assessments for mobility, open space, and community character, and we can look at what specifically that looks like in a minute. And then the implementation and appendix sections. The implementation piece really talks about how we implement these plans. So what are the steps that we need to take to implement these plans? It's some very specific actions. And then the appendix are a set of resources that are available to just the general public. It also includes a community toolkit, which are really resources that exist throughout the city in helping the community achieve whatever they might need for their specific neighborhood area. So this is what the neighborhood toolkit basically has in it. It's resources in terms of how you or what resources exist in terms of access to housing, residential goods and services, some open space and environmental justice resources. It's got mobility resources, community character resources, and then neighborhood leadership and capacity building. And those are really a good example of what the toolkit would be able to help with is if a neighborhood or community group wanted to take some action to either amenitize an open space or create a neighborhood park. This toolkit would provide them with some of the resources available citywide to help them get there. So after adoption, this is the number of ways that these plans can be implemented. The plans can be implemented through future development. So if there's a future private development that we're coming into the city and we wanted to see or the developer wanted to see what projects are either planned or what gaps there are in the area to help them then address some of those gaps or needs through their project. That's one way that these plans can be implemented. The other way is through public-private partnerships and us partnering with developers on some of these gaps. Capital improvements is another key way where this would be implemented. So if there's some dollars that the city has to um, a lot to some of the capital improvements. We can then look at these specific geography needs and see what those are. And then rezonings and alignment rezoning, and rezonings would happen on the private side, and then the alignment rezoning piece would be something that's undertaken by the city. That's another way that these can be implemented. It's really important to note that even though this is the third level of planning in our planning framework, there is additional planning that might need to occur as some specific needs arise, and that's where the specific plans would come in. And as with any adopted plans, these are living documents and would need to be updated periodically. In terms of next steps, we had a webinar just like this one yesterday evening, and we have one today, but it's the one you're sitting in right now. July 18th, which is at the end of this week, our comment period closes. July 25th, we have committed to providing comments that have been made throughout this entire process, as well as those staff responses on our website. So everything will be posted on our website. August 4th, there is a Transportation Planning and Development Committee presentation, and that's the council committee that typically has been hearing this information before it goes to council for a decision. And council decision is to be determined at this time. We're hoping that that happens at some point this year. The last slide that I have is just some additional resources and where to find information. Everything that I've presented today and everything that we've done since 2023 is available on our website at cltfuture2040.com. There's also an a virtual open house, which basically takes you through this sort of same webinar process, just in Um, in the website, you can, kind of thumb through all of the plans and leave comments and look at maps, interactive maps and things like that. The draft plans themselves are on the website. You can read the plans there and share feedback right in the plans. We will continue to have office hours, and that's an opportunity to speak one-on-one to staff. So Tuesdays, 11 to 1 p.m., and then Thursdays, 3 to 5 p.m. That's available virtually. The libraries all have hard copies of the plans throughout the city. We had a public hearing on May 12th, and then subsequent to that, we had virtual webinars, much like this one on May 15th. We had one yesterday, and this is the final one this week. So that is really it for the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and just, I think it's just still you and I. Let me stop sharing so that I can see the if there's anyone else. Okay, so it's just you and I, Kimberly. I am happy to kind of take your lead, answer your questions, walk you through the plans, whatever you feel like you need to get an understanding of where we are, what the plans have.
No, that's fantastic. I actually would love a couple of things, and maybe you could just give me a steer, maybe then
Sure.
answer the question because it may be beyond the scope of the
Yeah.
presentation. Is it possible that I could find somewhere, I'm sure I could create it, but is there an overlay of the city council districts over this
Yes.
so that I can understand that?
Yes.
I want to be articulate on it,
Yeah.
and I would be representing six.
Yeah. Let me go to our map. I think our policy map has a layer on it, but before I send you in that direction, let me just make sure that that's right.
Yeah,
It's
no,
something that,
that would be very helpful for
yeah,
me to be able to know. What has the uptake been from the community, particularly in this area? Have you
yeah.
been uniquely assigned to this area, or you do the entire 14?
So we've kind of shifted around, but I will say that in terms of comments, the comments have been pretty consistent throughout the city. Mobility
Okay.
continues to be the number one, regardless of where you are in the city. Um, the concern about infrastructure in terms of we have all of this growth, and is infrastructure really keeping up with demand? And so these plans can really help point to some of where the gaps are, and then help from a decision-making standpoint, really point to where the opportunities for filling in some of those gaps are in terms of capital investments. Um, the other concern is that, people are either really on board with growth or not. And that's not really unique to Charlotte. I feel like that's really anywhere that you go, that's really the
Yeah.
sentiment. And also then affordability, which is sort of beyond the scope of this planning effort, but it could be influenced indirectly by making sure that we're responsible in the way that we're developing. So those are kind of the big ticket items that we've been hearing, just it not just through this planning process, but also through the policy map, which happened in 2022, and then the comprehensive plan, really, which happened in 21. So it's been sort of a consistent theme. Um, so
So
I
just I want to. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
I was just going to share. So a couple of themes. Since I've launched my campaign and I have been doing these listening tours and trying to learn from people. A couple of things that I am hearing, and I'll just kind of throw it out there, and you can maybe provide me with some language so I can be responsive in a way that
Sure.
is appropriate for the audience. The first comment that I'd heard was a lot to do with the timing. So you look at years 21, 22, 23. You've got COVID, you've got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of restraints on ability of folks to really engage with one another. Is
Mm-hmm.
that something that you're encountering, or do you have confidence that the rollout of these things was really done in a manner that did get input,
Yeah.
notwithstanding
Yeah.
restrictions?
So with regard to that, so COVID really had impacted the comprehensive plan process, which kind of happened in the middle of it, and we were able to pivot and then roll out an entire series of online sort of webinars and engagement, as well as then some like limited in person, but spaced out. So we were actually able to do a drive in sort of engagement effort. And since comp plan, we've probably engaged about 400,000 people throughout, like from comp plan to now. So we feel confident that somewhere along the line, we've at least touched 400,000 people in terms of engagement. I
Okay.
believe the number for comments and feedback was around uh 5 or 6,000, somewhere in that range, for the previous planning efforts. And then for this particular planning effort, it's like 1,700. And that number continues to be updated the more that we do these types of webinars. Those continue to be updated. So I feel like while we didn't capture every single person in the city, we did hit at least 400,000 people from comp plan to now. And so, um, I feel confident in that effort.
Okay.
Um, we
Yeah, and
do.
again, these are not me criticisms. This is
Sure.
just me, kind of fact gathering.
Yes.
So one of the things that also I've heard, and I'm just looking at the email, and I won't share the name because I don't know that
Sure.
I'm comfortable doing that. But anyway,
Yeah.
the critique of the UDO that
Mm-hmm.
she expresses here is that it was designed on one uh, based in Minneapolis. And by the time it went through, it was already known to be a failure. Putting townhouses and ADUs in single family neighborhoods doesn't help with affordability. It just pisses off people who live there. I mean, a lot of the same sentiments that I hear whenever
Yes.
there is a density play.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple strains here. So that's one is just the density issues. The second one is that the city isn't doing anything about corporate owned single family homes being turned into rentals or Airbnbs. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
second issue. And then the third issue is that none of these plans are really doing some of the cool, quote unquote, cool roofs or any of the innovations to really address
Yeah.
heat. So can you
Yes.
point me in the direction of answers to all three of those?
Yes. So I'll start backwards because that's probably the simpler the simpler one, without getting into a philosophical conversation. But with regard to cool roofs and some environmental impact or justice tools. So the city just adopted the CAP, which is the Strategic
Mhm.
Energy Action Plan. I want to say earlier this year, and
Yep.
that does have guidance for things like urban heat index and some of these other projects and tools that can be used to try to mitigate some of the climate issues that we're seeing. So
Okay.
that we do have tools for that. Let me just make a note of the things that I just want to send you in the link. Um,
Perfect. Thank you so
yeah,
much.
plus
I
link.
love this individual tutorial. I had not
Yeah,
planned one such, but it's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. And then the policy map.
And just for your knowledge, so I am a real estate attorney. I've
Sure.
practiced here in Charlotte for 30 years, but I've had a more global practice. And
Okay.
so some of these Charlotte issues are a bit new to me, and I'm just really trying to get up to
Understood.
speed. So
Yeah,
that's the one issue. And
that's the
then
one issue. With regard to density, so that is really I've worked up and down the East Coast, and density is something that it is really it's not really unique to Charlotte, but I have seen it more in South Florida and then in North Carolina in terms of density. One of the things that the comp plan gave us guidance on was to protect single family neighborhoods. And so a lot of the mapping that you see done in the policy map was done that way to be able to protect established single family neighborhoods. With that said, we know that growth is coming and that we have to plan somehow for it. And so, even if we were to not plan for that, it would still be here, right? So we needed a way to plan for that growth to be accommodated within the city. And so the approach was to really drive a lot of these the higher density and sort of apartments and townhome developments more towards the centers. So, and that's an attempt to make sure that the centers are accommodating the growth as well as that growth is going where the infrastructure is really appropriate for it. So I'm going to share my screen and just let you take a look at the policy map, which I'll link in the I'll link in the chat for you. But this is the policy map, which was the companion effort to the comprehensive plan policy language. This is sort of the land use component of it, basically. And what these colors are, if you look at the yellow, that's where the single family neighborhoods could be located or where they are existing. So you can see that a big portion of the city is yellow. And so what that meant was that if we needed to protect those for or preserve them for single family uses, then that really meant that it left all of these kind of corridors and thoroughfares to try to accommodate the growth for a couple reasons. One, because the infrastructure is either existing or planned to be along the corridors. And two, because a lot of the commercial areas or mixed use areas, I should say, would happen along the corridors. And so what you really want is proximity to those non-residential uses so that you can have, you know, proximity to your goods and services, your jobs, um, and try to mitigate environmental impacts. So that's sort of a long-winded way of explaining how we can do both, right? So how we can preserve our single-family areas and accommodate growth at the same time. Now, that being said, it's not perfect, right? Because nothing is perfect. But this is the way that we've been able to sort of map out where growth should go in a responsible way. And I just wanted to point out, so this is, I'll send you the link to this, but this is the where you can find the council district. If you turn on that layer, it'll then show you where your council district is and this is you right here.
Okay, so that really is that mid. I mean, I'm in the right group
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
okay. So it is
yes,
really
you are. Yep.
that's mid south. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. And let me I'm going to stop sharing this map so that I can share with you the link to it. Here's my chat. And just remember to just turn on that layer. You can find it on the upper right-hand corner.
Okay, layer in upper corner. Okay, cool.
Yep.
And then another the tenants from this email was around corporate owned single family homes
Oh,
and
yes.
Airbnbs. Is that anything that is being looked at?
Not to my knowledge, although there might be other groups in the city that might be looking at that. That is not a scope of this planning effort, though.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I know Woodson Bradley, state senator, has spoken about it and spoken about her opinion of what a scourge it is on Charlotte to have so
Yeah.
much of our property being sold, to folks who are going to use it for those purposes. And it's, no inspection, all cash offer. It's very hard for
Sure.
families to compete for those houses. And so it
Yeah.
gets pulled out of the let me, if I can, if you'll be so patient with me, I just
Sure.
want to go up to the top of this. This is a rather long email, by the way, from this
Mhm.
woman. And she says that the problem, she said her neighborhood is pretty angry at the city council due to the UDO and refusing to make any changes. That is inconsistent with what I've understood that the UDO is a living, breathing document and
It is.
several changes have been made to it. Is that
It
not
is. That's
true? Okay.
correct. Yeah. So changes from so it was adopted in 2022 and then effective June 1 of 2023. And since then there have been a number of changes to the UDO. And let me link, I'll link you to the UDO website as well,
Okay.
where that you can see the text amendments that have been done.
Okay.
Um, we are finally at the point where the changes are now being considered kind of more regularly, so at like 4 to 6 month increments, and that
Got it.
really is a maintenance. That's a really maintenance effort to make sure that the UDO is up to speed or up to date as much as possible.
Okay.
And I will
So
link that in the chat.
Perfect. So here's the rest of her comment. So it says the UDO has allowed the Alexander Youth Network to sell off a large chunk of land that borders our neighborhood to a developer who's currently in the process of clear cutting and will be building an entire neighborhood of townhouses. This is a single family neighborhood. The developer was not required to connect to an actual connector road, thermal road, and is solely connected to neighborhood roads, Piccadilly Drive and Rock Falls, which have neither sidewalks nor even lines on the street. The developer refuses to meet with the neighborhood, da 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 da. So, do you have any guidance for me as someone who would be serving a constituent like this with a
Hmm.
very specific question and a very specific example of where her neighborhood, or perhaps just she, but her neighborhood, she's
Right.
alleging, feels as though the UDO is not prioritizing the maintenance of single family neighborhoods?
Hmm. So for instances like that, we have paired uh, those constituents with our development center who have very specific asks about certain things or certain either mitigation or project improvements happening
Okay.
through our permitting, our development center. The other thing that does exist is through our entitlement services team, we have a team of planners that consistently look at the UDO and take into account the things that we've heard. You might be aware, but there is a UDO advisory committee that was formed when the UDO was being developed, and that has, I'm not sure when the last time that they've met, but it's basically a group of people that bring to the table concerns that they have. For example, something that they've heard to this effect. And then our team then goes back, looks at the UDO requirements, comes up with some proposed language or language that we can consider, and that's basically how UDO amendments are partly how they're born. They do go through a committee review, and so if it's something that is consistently coming up, we might bring it to that committee, um, have some conversation around it, and then make some recommendations in terms of UDO text updates before it goes through that process. So basically, it would need to go through our planning commission, I believe, and then through council for adoption to update the UDO.
Okay. So is there a specific person, as I described this Alexander Youth Network, is there a specific person that you could align me with that I could refer her to talk to? Or I mean, I'm not trying to do the job
Yeah,
before I have the job, but I
sure.
also want to be anticipating these sorts of things and have a good idea of how
Yeah.
to resolve them.
I don't have a specific person, but I think what would be the most helpful is if I can pass your information along to someone in that team and then they can determine who's the
Perfect.
best person. Did you register today with your email?
I did. I
Okay.
did.
So I will have your email in our registration list. And I can forward your contact to the right person, and then you should
Perfect.
expect a follow-up.
Perfect. Yeah, she said this to me, and I responded, I thanked her for her passion and asked, if we could have an opportunity, I could meet with the neighborhood and understand a little bit better. Um, One of the things that she mentions a little bit further, and this is where I think it may be useful to really have somebody who is focused on this specific development. It says that the development streets violate city code because they don't fit emergency vehicle turnaround, and no one at the city seems to care. This is leading to huge concerns about loss of tree canopy and wildlife habitat, water runoff, etc. So, I
Okay.
mean, there's a lot. This is a very dense email that addresses some very specific issues with respect to this particular development, and I'd
Yeah.
like to line her up with somebody who can speak more specifically and not just general.
Okay. So listening to that piece of it, it seems like she might benefit from having also either a conversation or some interaction with CDOT or NCDOT, depending on who owns the roads, and then tree canopy division. That's why I think it's best if I can just kind of
Perfect.
summarize all the concerns, send it to one person, and then have them
Right.
um, figure out who's the appropriate person because otherwise I'd
Fantastic.
be giving you like six names, and I don't
Yeah,
want to do that.
no, and I hear you. And I know that that is imperfect, but sometimes that is what it is because
Yeah,
that's the way sometimes these processes work, that there's a lot of different um, chefs in the kitchen. And I think
yes,
that that's maybe the reaction. But anyway, I
indeed.
was excited to get something from somebody in response to my outreach because a lot of folks
Sure.
are just like, who are you? Why are you bothering me? So, yeah. But anyway,
Okay. Let me do some follow up and just give me like a day or two, and I can have
no,
something for you.
it's all good. Let me, so I'm going to try to save the chat. I got to figure out how to do
Yeah.
that.
The other thing that I sent on there was a link to the CAP, which is the Strategic Energy Action Plan, and
Yep.
that's the information for the plan that was just adopted earlier this year.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So I am looking at the chat. I'm gonna save the chat. Awesome. I think somebody else is in our room.
Yes, yes. Hi,
So
Linda.
maybe
Hi,
it's
how
a
are you?
questions.
Linda, if you have specific questions, it's just us three, so feel free to unmute your microphone and we can just I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or give you an overview of what the plans have. I had a presentation earlier, so if you'd like, I can give you that. I'm happy to do whatever you might need.
Rachel, yeah, I'm new to the neighborhood of Providence Plantation specific, and your previous colleague said that you're covering that area. Just double check. There's a development area on Cakendale and Providence, which I know I started getting some information on, but that specific area, I'd like to know, is there an update on your planning or what's going on?
Yeah,
Uh,
let me bring you to the map. Just give me a second. Let me navigate there. So you're between Providence and what's that? 485.
Yeah, it's north of 485.
Okay.
Pakendale runs to east of Providence. It's before, let me think. It's south of the Pineville Matthews intersection.
Yep. So I think the most useful thing for me to share with you is the map itself.
Okay.
If you give me 1 second. Um, Okay, so this is the map for your area. This black boundary is where is the entire South Middle. If, as you can see, the map is where this map basically tells us how and where things should develop. So what that means is that the yellow is in areas that accommodate the neighborhood one uses. So think of your single family detached. That's where those uses can go. And as you can see, a large portion of this area is single family, and there's a lot of established neighborhoods for this area in this area. The neighborhood two are these orange sections, and that's really where you see a lot of your multifamily. So a lot of your apartment development can be found along there. And then the next sort of common use is these dark blue areas, which is where South Park Shopping Mall is. And then I think Ballantyne is also down here. This kind of incorporates some of that. So in terms of changes for this area, it's honestly largely staying the same in terms of the uses themselves. What might be useful as well is looking at what the mobility section has for this area. And let me just navigate there now. I'm sorry if this is making you a little dizzy. I'm just trying to get to um, the where the projects are. So in the mobility section, we have a series of things. We have a list of projects that would be either existing or planned. And then there's an assessment for where the gaps exist. So this first section really gives us the projects that may be listed on here. And as you can see, what this assessment looks at is these mixed use areas, so that the centers where a lot of the non-residential uses exist. And then it looks at how this area measures across these mobility characters. So when we talk about mobility, it's not just how to get around in a car. It's also how people are getting around by either walking or biking or using transit or the some of the other modes of transportation. So in terms of the pedestrian network, the bike network, and some of the crossings, which is really your crossings at intersections and in other areas, you can see that this section really has some gaps. And so, what this table would help us understand is, for example, along South Boulevard in this area, how does that measure against all of these sort of mobility characters? So is it pedestrian friendly? Is there a bike network? How are the crossings in this area? The legend, so how we can interpret this is the goal is for us to be aligned with the aspirations. So, for us to be able to check off these circles fully. And then at the other end of that spectrum is circles that are not checked off at all. And what that means is that there's a lot of room for improvement. And as you can see, a big portion of this area does have room for improvements. Um, and these are the locations where some of those centers exist that we can find some room for improvements in terms of projects. The other piece that this connects with is the strategic investment areas, and what those are areas that City Council has identified through community input as needing some really specific bundles of projects to try to close the gap with the mobility items that might exist. And so this one touches a number of strategic areas. It touches the Arrowwood, the South Tryon, the Randolph area, South Providence, Carmel and Johnson, and then South Park. And what these are a number of projects that can be bundled together to try to close some of the mobility gaps that exist. Now, in terms of the time that it would take to accomplish all of these, it would take a very long time, but this at least sets the framework for identifying those projects in a plan that can then, from a council perspective and from um, a private and public investment perspective, it can start to point at some of the projects that could be developed to close some of the gaps that exist in mobility today. So I'll stop there. Let me stop sharing so that I can see everyone. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions based on that. But Linda, to answer your question directly, in terms of the map itself, there's not much change happening in this area. And there are some opportunities for projects from a mobility standpoint for this area that are identified in the plan.
Okay. And my ask on that is mobility, I see a bus service up 16 Providence.
Yes.
Is there anything in that part of the program that would do like a park and ride situation? I see like the large Arboretum shopping center has
Hmm.
empty parking. It would be a perfect park, pick up the bus instead of, traffic going in downtown, right?
Sure.
Or whatever. Is that in the conversation or is that just not? I mean,
Yeah, so there is a project. Let me see what's the closest one to that area. There's a Providence and Sardis, Providence and Candlewick, and then Providence and McKee. Those are
okay,
all areas that are identified to receive well, identified gaps in projects.
okay,
With regard to the park and ride, that's a CATS specific function, and they are a partner in this effort. What they do have is some uh, planning that has to happen around their Better Bus system. And so that happens independent of this planning project, but they have been a partner in this process. So the things that this plan can help them do is really look at where the growth is projected to go and happen, and then they can then plan their services accordingly based on that.
Okay. And the other thing, as far as access, walking paths off main roads, separate paved walking paths. How do you request that? What's the process?
So that happens, it depends on who, you mean along sidewalks or where sidewalk gaps exist?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it depends on one who the road, like who owns the road, and then where these gaps are. So some gaps are on either city roads or state roads, and that would be a conversation with either CDOT, which is the city's Department of Transportation, who's responsible for city roads. And then if it's a state road, that would be a conversation with the NC Department of Transportation, which is the state. There is the other way that these projects can happen is either through private development, which, if there's a piece of property that is owned by a private developer and that's being developed, some of their improvements might be to provide sidewalk along the frontage. And then the sort of last way that these conversations could happen is through uh, public investments. And part of what this plan could help with is identifying, if you remember the list that I was going through before with the assessment, identifying some of those areas where it's appropriate to make maybe some future investments and have that be city funded. I know that was a long-winded answer, but it really just depends on where we're talking about.
Totally get it. And it's thanks for giving me, where to go, because it seems like a whole sea of people, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right about that. Yes.
And going back to that previous conversation with Kimberly, the tree situation, is there any city or oversight when a new developer goes into a space, an existing treed development, and literally flattens everything, like it's that there's not a tree, and then starts planting 1 foot high things. Is
Yes.
there a section of the city that has oversight, or as far as when it goes, I guess, to environmental and also just the look of Charlotte, the
Yeah.
fact that we're very proud of our trees.
Yes. There is. Let me point you to the appropriate section. Hang on one sec. Let me look that up. There's a tree canopy preservation division that we have in the city, and they would be responsible for doing a lot of the reviews. When plans come in for development, they basically review those plans against whatever the tree regulations are. I'm not an expert in those regulations, but I can point you to a resource if you just give me one second. Let's see. Okay, so this is the division that is responsible for tree canopy. I'm going to drop it in the chat.
Okay.
I did want to mention before I forget that any of the comments that get captured here, we will put them into our tracking mechanism and make them available along with the responses on our website. So these links will also be available on our website through the comment response sheet.
Thank you. That's helpful as to how I get involved and get some information. So
Sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Kristen, I see you joined. We have about 6 minutes left. I'm happy to, answer any questions that you might have. It's okay if you don't have any and you just want to listen as well.
So, Gretchen, I did have a quick question.
Yes.
So one of the things that came up, I sat in, just for my edification, I sat in on the 11 to noon, and I just was directed to a room that wasn't necessarily, pertinent to me as
Sure.
a resident, or pertinent to me as to District 6. But one of the comments that I heard was, how has community engagement gone and how do you envisage that it should go forward? Is there an expectation on the part of each of the city council members to really try to cull together lists of folks and have them added to the listserv? Sort of what is that process to ensure that people are getting information?
Yeah, so I can there's a couple of ways to get engaged. One of them continues to be the website. Everything is available on the website, and I can drop the link to that. From we understand that the plans do have a lot of information in them, and what we've heard at council is that council, um, well, at least from one council member, that council should be sort of reading through these plans and then providing that information to their district, to their constituents, basically. So from a council perspective, we have had council members who have shown support and continued engagement and who have really dove into the plans and then understood them and then provided that information to their constituents. Planning committee, I believe, has done the same as well. Um, and planning committee is the committee that has provided a recommendation to TPD and then council as well. So let me share a couple of resources with everyone so that we can so that you know where to find information. So the website still continues to be the the best place to get information because we provide everything on the website. And then it's constantly updated. So I'll drop a link to where to find the draft plans as well as the interactive plans themselves and then the map. So that's on the in the chat. I'll also provide an email where if you want to get in contact with staff, if there's something that has not been answered, you want to, do a one-on-one with staff, please feel free to just reach out to us via email. Or if there's a comment that you want to leave that you haven't been able to leave, you can just email our email as well. The other thing that you'll be able to find in terms of engagement is the office hours. Those have been really, really helpful, and you can sign up for those on the website as well. So everything is on our project website. I'll drop that in the chat. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that is helpful. I had heard it proposed by one council member that some of these CAPs were perhaps more advanced because of more engagement from certain communities, and that perhaps it made sense to split them up for approval and not have them all approved as one package. Do you have a sense for the wisdom or not of that proposal?
Yes. So, we early on in the process, the direction was to make sure that we were developing all of these plans at the same time, and the hope is that they would be adopted at the same time. And the reason for that is because we don't want to leave any part of the city without the guidance that they need for an extended period of time. And so doing it in that way would make sure that every part of the city has the same level of guidance um, at the same time. In the past, that is not how the planning efforts had gone, but really the reason for that is because the comp plan didn't exist. And so what these plans do is well, what the comp plan can give us is a citywide level of guidance, and then these plans supplement that with additional guidance for each geography. So we wouldn't want to leave a section of the city without the level of guidance that is needed from the community area plans. And that's part of the reason for um, developing them all at once, and that is a good sort of justification for adopting them all at once. Kristen, I see you have a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I've been requesting a sidewalk extension in my neighborhood for like many years now. It used to be that it was like resident driven where you could request one and they would do an assessment of like how close the school is and like all these different factors and stuff to then rank your street. And I also had to get like signatures from my neighbors, all that kind of thing. And so I did that process. And then a few years ago, when they started doing this whole Charlotte 2040 plan, they nixed that list. So that list still is there, but they're not using it to actually make any decisions about sidewalks. And it's all just based on like this plan. And what I've been told is that all sidewalks are going to be prioritized for like thoroughfares. So like high traffic city streets, and that like more side streets, residential streets and stuff like that would be not as prioritized. The thing that is interesting about where the place that I'm requesting is that it's a planned urban development from the 1970s. So it's probably one of the very first planned urban developments in Charlotte. And where it has like apartments, condos, and single family homes. And there's sidewalks all throughout, except for right when you get to the single family home, the sidewalk stops. And people can't go from the apartments or the condos and then continue to walk to where it would connect to Carmel Road, to where there's a bus stop. And people are always like forced into the street, but it's a very awkward the way it is. You could see like where it is, and then it just like as soon as the property lines start, it just like stops, you know. So I've been requesting just this little sliver of land to be continued, and I've been talking with Julian. I can't remember his last name.
Yes, Julian.
And stuff, and
CDOT.
Yeah, and so there's just like no real progress. And the other thing I noticed is that the maps and stuff that are online, it lists because this is like a kind of L-shaped section of roads where that is not listed as a collector street, whereas a different road, Valencia Terrace, is listed as a collector street, but they already have a sidewalk. And so I was like, well, if I get these two roads listed as a collector street, would they then have a higher chance of being able to have a sidewalk added? And they were like, no. There's another person, Tracy, that I was talking to, and she was like, I don't think it would increase the chance that you would get a sidewalk, you know. So I'm like, okay, well, if it does, then I want to go through the process of getting these streets listed as collector streets to then have a higher chance of getting the sidewalk. But if it's not part of it, then, you know, whatever. But I'm just trying to get a better handle of like how I can move forward.
Yeah, so actually, I was going to ask if you had been in contact with anyone at CDOT, because CDOT would be the department that you would need to go through. Just for your benefit, Tracy Newsom is now retired,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
Julian is the right person to be in contact with. And I'm not as familiar with the process of adding or like getting streets classified. So I would defer to Julian, and I know that he's not he is out for the next couple weeks. So if you've contacted him recently, that might be a reason why he's hasn't gotten back to you.
He just tells me to keep checking in with him every few months, so I do and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, keep up with the future 2040 plans or whatever." And I do, and it never really seems to pertain to what I'm trying to accomplish. So
understood.
And I know, like, just in the South Park area in general, there's that whole. This is like a private thing where they, it's the South Park Mall and then other areas around
yes,
there.
the MSD.
They're making this whole trail type thing. Sorry, what did you call it?
MSD. It's the Municipal Service District.
Yeah. And so this area that I'm requesting is actually like right beside of it. And so it would kind of help connect, to where people could just continue to ride their bike and then connect through the neighborhood and then go down Carmel Road and all that kind of thing. So anyways, so basically your advice is just keep talking to Julian.
Yeah, he would be the right person.
Okay. And do you have any sense of like being listed as a collector street, if that increases your chance of having a sidewalk?
I mean, if it's on the streets map, it's at least on a plan. The street map is basically the classification of streets within Charlotte. I don't want to give you wrong
Because it's
information.
not listed as a collector street. It's just listed, I don't remember what it was called, but it was something else.
Gotcha. I don't want to give you wrong information, so I would defer to Julian, since this is work coming out of his department.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a very long time. I started this like 6 years ago. So it's definitely been a process.
Understood. Okay, so we are a little over time. I want to thank everyone for their time today. I've provided the resources and links in the chat. Um, and if there's any other questions that I can answer, please feel free to ask them in the last few minutes. Otherwise, thank you again for joining, and we really appreciate your time and input.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Gretchen. It's a final one.
Yes.
Is there a site specifically for the planning of affordable housing? I know that, Charlotte has purposely trying to help with this, but what is that?
Yes. So there's a couple things that that might help. One is let me just link you to our HNS department, which is our Housing and Neighborhood Services. They have some resources available. So they typically handle a lot of the neighborhood services, and then they have a function that handles affordable housing as well.
Perfect. Okay.
Great.
You've been a star. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
And this will be recorded so we can listen again if you want to pick up on what we don't remember, right?
Yes, it's being recorded, and then we will make it available on our website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Appreciate you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Bye for now.